What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Post-Gazette Sports Now YouTube channel and podcast network. I'm Noah Hiles. He's Andrew Destin, as always. The show is brought to you by the North Shore Tavern. If you love baseball, you'll love the North Shore Tavern. Their interior is wall-to-wall Pirates. There are appetizers, entrees, cocktails, and, of course, steak and seafood on a sizzling lava stone. Open every day. The North Shore Tavern is across the street from PNC Park and is Pittsburgh's home for steak on a stone. Andrew, Pirates conclude a brief homestand, just a little weekend stint, 3 games against the Seattle Mariners here at PNC Park. They win on Friday and Saturday. They delay it, or they lose it, I should say, on Sunday in a blowout, but still 2 out of 3, to quote Meatloaf, ain't bad. Is that who said that?
Something like
that. But a series win, something that this team has not done since taking 2 of 3 from the Astros prior to the trade deadline. So, just your overall takeaways for the series so far. Not so far, now that it's concluded.
Right, yeah. I would say the biggest takeaway for me is just that, obviously this was a rotten road trip, right, with losing 10 games in a row. When you look at it at face value, frankly, it put the Pirates out of postseason contention, barring some unforeseen 10-game winning streak or, winning 12 out of 14 or something of that ilk. So to me, the priorities remain the same, which is looking ahead to the future, looking ahead to the rest of the season in terms of how does this stretch impact the club for moving forward well into the future? How do you position this team for 2025? That being said, club could easily spiral, right? This is a really easy stretch where you could say, okay, lose 3 to the Mariners, drop to lose 13 in a row. So to come back and win 2 out of 3, do well against some decent starting pitching, some excellent starting pitching, frankly, to give credit where it's due. My biggest takeaway is just that this team easily could have quit, and it didn't. So that's my big takeaway.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that it's when you lose 10 games in a row, you forget what it's like to win, in a way. I mean, and obviously they don't forget. It was this team's won 59 games this year, so they're familiar with it, but this group needed this. It needed a day where it needed a weekend where it could win back-to-back and remind itself that, hey, like we were at one point in time, not long ago, a competitive baseball team fighting for the playoffs. And while the playoffs probably aren't in this team's future this year, if they could play of that caliber of baseball for these last 39 games, that's a big positive. Another big positive for this team, Joey Bart.
Yeah.
Let's talk about him. Your guy, as a San Francisco guy, as a Bay Area guy, you grew up watching this guy. Talk about Joey Bart.
It's just, I think the thing that stands out to me is the consistency. And that's something that Derek Shelton's talked about, Joey Bart a little bit. But if you really take away a couple of weeks in April where he didn't hit the ball that well, right, this is a guy that all season has had a tremendous year. Mm-hmm. The only thing you can hold against the guy is that he's gotten hurt, which you can't hold against the guy, right? So my takeaway from there is just that he's shown flashes before. This is a guy who's demonstrated why he was a number 2 overall pick at various points in time. The defense remains a work in progress. Blocking is still something he struggles with a little bit. The arm has improved significantly. Nobody's really running on the guy as much. But the offensive exploits, I mean, they speak for themselves. A new career high in home runs with 12, hitting 1 on Sunday. This is a guy who really has just taken the catching job and run with it, and it beckons the conversation that we've talked about multiple times on here of how do you approach the catching situation in 2025. I think it's clear cut. I think this is your guy.
This is their catcher. Yeah. Just because, I mean, Endy Rodriguez, to me, is still a very intriguing prospect, and Endy Rodriguez might be the catcher of the future for the Pittsburgh Pirates. Joey Bart is the catcher for 2025 until Endy Rodriguez or Henry Davis show that they are a better option. One of them needs to simply play more baseball because he was out this season due to the Tommy John surgery. That's Endy. And the other needs to hit the baseball and prove that, he is a big league caliber player, at least at the plate. Until those guys do that, you have a very good option with Joey Bart. Not just average. I mean, this guy's been playing an above average grade at this position. He's not an all-star, but he has been one of the better players on the team this year across the board. So I absolutely think when they go to Bradenton next spring, right after the Super Bowl, that this is the guy who should be number 1 on the depth chart until one of the young guys comes and takes this spot from him. So on the note of Bradenton, when this team reports to Bradenton, when it goes to Pirate City next year, Andrew, when we get to our Airbnb with our sunglasses and our suntan lotion and our blank notebooks ready to document a new season, what position is Oneil Cruz going to be playing?
Sounds like shortstop, man. And I know it's something, first to plug the story that Noah wrote on Post-Gazette.com. This is something that Ben Charrington talked about today on his radio show, but it sounds like the plan for moving forward continues to be that Oneil Cruz will be a shortstop. I know for many of you, maybe that's frustrating just given the struggles he's had at times there, but I thought there was a lot of intriguing commentary that we can get into more so here, but just that Oneil's struggles at short partially is that this is a guy who's still learning to be at that position on a regular basis at the big league level. You know, it's a position he's played for a long time, but playing it with this type of game speed certainly challenging, and especially when you compound that with coming off the injury. It's a guy who basically missed all of 2023, still a developing young player, has some issues with the injury where this is an ankle that is not at 100%, and we've seen that at various times throughout the year where either he's taken games off or tweaked it, running the bases or fielding, things of that nature. So it's a guy who's going to play shortstop, but I just thought that was some really interesting discussions that we saw or heard from Ben Charrington.
I'm interested that you took his comments to be that way, because I think what Ben had to say pertained more to an explanation of the now, rather than a preview of the future.
Okay.
The way I interpreted his comments were, here's why Oneil Cruz is the shortstop right now. The way they viewed it was, very rarely do you get that type of power production or the potential of that power production from that spot in the infield.
Right.
You can look around. There are a couple of guys, your Corey Seagers, Carlos Correa in his prime. You can go back further, obviously. But that's traditionally not a place where you can get, what does Oneil have now, a 780 OPS, maybe something a little higher, maybe a little lower, who knows. But that's what they had in mind. This is a rarity. This is something that we could set ourselves apart from the rest of the pack with, where our shortstop is going to hit X amount of home runs more than most of the other shortstops in baseball. That's how they viewed it. That was their logic coming into this year. And I think another part of their logic, as Ben said, was this was a very unproven player.
Yep.
This is a guy who is in his first full year in the big leagues. He's still 25 years old. And he's had some injuries. And so they kind of wanted to give him a year to see how he looked. Now, how did he look at the plate? I think he's looked decent.
Yep.
Still, obviously, room for improvement, but a very solid first full big league season for this guy at the dish. In the field, there's some good stuff. The arm looks good. Fielding, he had another error today. That's 24 on the season. That's second most in Major League Baseball behind Elly De La Cruz. And I think this guy will eventually get moved to another position. I don't know if it's next year. Maybe they give him one more year. But I don't think by the time Oneil Cruz is finished with his Pirates tenure or finished with his big league tenure, I think by the time Oneil Cruz is 28 years old, he's 25 right now, I think by the time he's 28, he'll have a different position. I just think it makes a lot of sense. And you look, other players who have a similar profile, maybe not physically as with the height, but with the electric ability and the 5-tool caliber. A guy like Fernando Tatis was a shortstop at one point in time.
Yeah.
He's not anymore. I don't think Elly De La Cruz will be a shortstop forever. I think he will eventually make his way out to the outfield, and I think it would make a lot of sense when you look at what this team has right now, Andrew, in its farm system. They have a lot of middle infielders, and while sure you would like to have one of your best power bats at shortstop, they also have a gaping hole in center field for the future of this team. And if you put Cruz in center field, you still get to make use of that arm. You still get to make use of his athleticism. Sure, the ankle is a little bit of concern, but you're not necessarily planting and stopping on a dime like you are at shortstop out in center field. You're more running, and he's able to run. We see him run all the way out to deep left field to make plays sometimes. So I think that they will explore this a little bit, and I think that Charrington kind of said that in the way that he says things.
Yes.
Where I am trying to keep the cards as close to the vest as possible, and I'm going to give a diplomatic answer, but he didn't write off the idea that Oneil could be playing another position in the future, which to me says that, hey, maybe that is coming sooner rather than later. So I'm sure fans would love to see it. So on that note, Andrew, final point we want to make today is, they win a series. They're closer to getting back to that 500 mark, still way out of the postseason race. Does a series victory change anything? Is it still 2025 is the focus right now?
For me, yes. Yeah. They're probably not going to say it outwardly, not publicly at the very least. But to me, that's the priority, right, is continuing to figure out who are these guys who are going to be part of this process moving forward and whether that leads to further transactions, more roster moves. There's various guys who are banged up on the injured list.
Yep.
And we've seen Andrew McCutchen go on the IL. This is a guy who was battling through it for a few weeks. I'm not implying anything by pointing that out, but maybe if this team were in more serious of a postseason run, this is a guy who would continue to play through that kind of injury, maybe things of that nature. I bring that up to say that there's a lot of guys that they still have to figure out a lot about. So I still think the focus is on the future, how that leads to guys being managed, whether that's a Paul Skeens innings limit, whether that's how quickly we see Jared Jones come back, who's at least thrown one more rehab assignment in AAA Indianapolis. There's so many guys that I still want to learn more about, whether that's people currently in the minors, whether that's guys who started the years in the big leagues and are back in AAA. That remains the focus on my end, just given the relative short runway and how many questions there still are on the Major League roster.
And who's to say some of these guys don't help them win now?
Sure.
More than current players. Is Henry Davis going to be that much of a downgrade right now compared to Grandal? Is Billy Cook or Nick York going to be that much of a downgrade compared to G1 Bay and Jared Triolo? Is Jake Woodford an upgrade over Braxton Ashcraft once he gets healthy, or Michael Burrows, or maybe even Bubba Chandler or Thomas Harrington? I don't know. I don't think so. We'll see what the Pirates think. You can follow our work at post-gazette.com. He is Andrew Destin. I am Noah Hiles. Thanks for tuning in. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and keep tuning in to the Post-Gazette Sports Now YouTube channel and podcast network for all of your Pittsburgh Pirates content. Take care.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.